Bontemps got a fair amount of reaction to the straw poll from a couple of days ago, and one of the surprises I think was that Jayson Tatum remained six. I would say that the voters were unmoved by Tatum's play recently because he was sixth in your first poll in December, sixth in this poll, no first or second place votes. Despite him having a good season and the Celtics just having a spectacular first half, more than first half, first 50 games. They won by 50 on Wednesday night against the Nets. He had 40 in that game to go, or he had 40 on Tuesday. They played them back home and home. Tatum is shooting the ball better this year. His scoring average is down, but that's not a bad thing. He's taking sort of some smarter shots. What's your opinion as to why Tatum hasn't gotten more traction in MVP voting?
I mean, we talked about this a little bit the other day. I think it's a combination of. I mean, I think it's less about the way that he and the Celtics have played in the playoffs, and I just think it's more that, because we talked about that the other day. I think it's more that his numbers are very good, but they're just not of the same supercharged caliber of these other guys that we're talking about. In part because the Celtics have a ton of talent, and they've got Kristaps Porzingis getting the ball a bunch, and Jaylen Brown getting the ball a bunch, and Derek White and Drew Holiday getting the ball a bunch. So his usage rate is lower than some of these other guys. And I also think part of it is he's just not quite seen in the same realm as Giannis and Luka and Jokic, and even to an extent, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a player. Now, again, I think he's one of the 10 best players clearly in the league. He's probably, for me, somewhere between like 6 or 7 and 9. Like, tremendous player, but generally you see a guy who's in the top 5 win this award. And I think if Boston goes on to win 65 games, which they're very capable of doing, then perhaps that will change as the year goes along. But I think with the numbers that these other guys are putting up, I just think it's going to be difficult for Tatum to move up higher on the ballot. And I sort of think this is what we're going to see for a while for Jayson Tatum, frankly, which is that he's probably going to be somewhere around 4th or 5th every year, which is basically what he's been, because he's an awesome player and his team is awesome, but he's just not quite seen as a top 5 guy in the league as of now. Now he's also like 26 and has continued to get better, and he could ascend more. But I think that's generally why he's, I don't want to say an afterthought, but he's farther down the list than these other guys.
Yeah, Zach Lowe and I both picked Tatum before the season when we did an awards pod, under kind of the logic that, number one, the Celtics we thought were the best team in the NBA, and number two, that some of the players that traditionally have been at the top of the ballot might be ineligible because of the 65 game rule, as we have now seen to come to pass with Joel Embiid. I think part of it is not only that Tatum's numbers are not as good as the top 3 guys in particular. They're also not even as good as last season because of, the additions the Celtics have made. And it's kind of funny. I can understand if you're a Celtics fan, it seems like from a individual recognition standpoint, people are talking out of both sides of their mouth where, on the one hand, Tatum is on the same level. On the other hand, we have this team that's clearly far and away the best regular season team in the league, plus 10-point differential, going to have a terrific, regular season, like one that stacks with the all-time best regular seasons. And they have 2 all-stars, which is kind of funny. I mean, Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis, kind of 2 in that next group out in the Eastern Conference. But to go back to Tatum specifically, I did not ultimately have him on my ballot. I think, the top 3 to me, assuming those guys stay healthy, are pretty close to a lock. Those guys, have separated themselves from the field, being Jokic, Giannis, and SGA. 4th and below, that's up for debate. I think very much so. And Tatum has a chance if he has a strong finishing kick down the stretch here, and Boston, remains number 1 by a wide margin. I think 4th is probably his ceiling, which is where he finished last year.
Right, that's true. Now, I will say that the Celtics have a number of high-profile national television games after the break here, including that game in Denver. there is a window for him to sort of improve his case. Although the way they play, the depth that they have, the way that they spread the ball around, I mean, he could play brilliantly and still not get, that sort of string of 40 or 50 or even the 60-point games that some of the other guys at the top have gotten. And he has said that's not what he's looking for. So I'm a big believer in Tatum. I have sort of locked horns with the other guys on this pod in the past over my belief that he can be a top 5 player and do it at the highest level. He has taken he has taken some hits in the last couple of years for the way he played in the finals. He just did not have a great finals. He was being bothered by a wrist injury, but I think he had a 13 or 14 point performance in the elimination game against the Warriors on their home floor. Last year, he had a very anemic performance on Game 7 against the Heat on his home floor. He was awesome in Game 7 against the Sixers. He had 51, and that game was a blowout. He didn't seem like he got the maybe appropriate credit for that, and he also was great in the fourth quarter of Game 6. So it's not like the resume is all full of holes. He just, and even Donovan Mitchell, who, Donovan responded, to the straw poll, not directly, but, I think Donovan was a little bit frustrated that he wasn't higher on the straw poll and talked about it a little bit the next couple of, like 36 hours after it came out, even though the Cavs had a kind of a shaky loss at home to the 76ers that, were missing like 3 top guys. Donovan was talking after the game about his MVP chances, but he did come on NBA Today on Wednesday and was talking about how he thinks that his MVP candidacy is affected by his scattered playoff record, and that he understands that for him to really ever get up there, he probably has to prove himself in the postseason, fair or not. So I think that is a factor.
It also just needs to be said that the ballot is full of ridiculous players. Like Kevin Durant is averaging 28 points on 54% shooting, 44% from 3, averaging like 6 rebounds, just under 6 assists. And he got like a handful of votes. I think he was 9th, right? Like, we're talking about like, there's a lot of guys having unbelievable seasons. So I don't think and I'm not saying you're framing it this way, but I don't think it's a crime that Jayson Tatum is 6th and Donovan Mitchell is 8th.
I agree.
It's just, it's a loaded field. It's very hard to pick between these guys.
I agree. And, and just we're in this such offensive era that, because if you're a Cavs fan and you're not watching the league and you're watching Donovan put up these 45-point games and, routinely put up 30, and your team's in second place in the East and you've won 16 out of 18 or 17 out of 19 or whatever it is now. And, this straw poll is, it's really, really authentic. It's one of the, McMahon makes fun of me, but like truly it's a really good thing that Bontemps has done. And it like is a real good data readout on the way things are. And like, so if you're a Cavs fan, or if you're a Celtics fan, you're watching Tatum have all these really good games, and then you see this poll, I get where you're like, what's going on? But it's hard to have that perspective. I mean, just for offensive perspective, the Lakers, okay, they put up 138 at the Jazz on Wednesday night. And Stats Williams had this incredible number that over the last 11 games, the Lakers have had the highest point average for an 11-game stretch since 1987. And you would never look at this Laker team and say, boy, that's going to rival the Showtime Lakers. But they are playing Showtime level basketball offensively right now. So I think there is some sort of grappling with the numbers, and that lack of perspective can affect the way people look at the MVP race, because even though we've seen this scoring bubble over the last few years, it's still, accelerating at this point.